Thank you. And good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Cincinnati Public Schools Audit Committee meeting on Wednesday, October 16th. We'll go ahead and call the meeting to order. The first item on the agenda is our fiscal year 25 Audit Committee goals. And as you are probably aware, we did start talking about this back in June, and we did have further discussion in August. And so we have not finalized yet, but have written up a draft of our 3 goals for the fiscal year 2025. I won't read them out loud because you could just read them. But I'll summarize them at a high level. So the first one is to support and advise the Board of Education on the treasurer and/or superintendent search. It's going to be a very key area for the district, and so we can play a pretty strong role in those 2 searches and 2 evaluations. The second one is to support and advise the Board of Education district on other areas of need. This typically comes up every year where we're asked to help in some fashion, and we know we have some pretty high level things coming up in the next year, including levy decisions, Senate Bill 308, the budget, and the CRA agreement with the City of Cincinnati. So those will be some pretty high level areas that we'll be asking volunteers of the audit committee to help out as the board and as the district asks for that help. And then the third is to really increase the exposure of the audit committee and the internal audit function to the board and help them understand what it is that the audit committee and the internal audit function does. And I think that kind of just ties in with the other 2 areas. So we've spent a few meetings talking about these goals. They're in front of you, and I can open it up to any further discussion, but we do want to finalize and ratify these, I guess, so to speak, here at this meeting. So any questions or comments? Okay, hearing none. Do we need to do a formal vote?
I don't think we historically have, but if we'd like to formalize it a bit more this year, we certainly could.
Okay,
We could do an all in favor, perhaps. I don't know that we need a roll call for
let's
this.
do that.
Okay, so I'll let you lead the way with an all in favor if you don't
Okay,
mind.
so I would need to ask for someone to motion. Okay,
I motion.
can I have a second?
Okay.
Thank you. All in favor of these draft goals being formalized as our formal goals for 2025, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, we have our goals. The next item on our agenda is a general membership update. So as we all know, we do have changes in membership every year. After 15 years of service, David Foote has decided to step down at the end of his term at the end of this year. So first of all, I would like to thank David for his leadership and guidance over these last 15 years. Certainly sad to see you go, but understand that it's maybe time. And as we discussed in the last meeting, former, I guess he's still Jim Crossett is now on the board. He's taking a leave of absence from the audit committee, so he could potentially come back in the future without having to go through the full process. So that leaves a couple vacancies, and so we have opened up the audit committee. I guess Lauren has posted the audit committee position out there. So we will be going through that process. We have until November 8th for the window of considering candidates. So I would ask that anybody that's interested in being a part of the interview process for those audit committee members to just let me know. And I don't want to put anyone on the spot here. You could do so offline, and we'll do that process. And we will ultimately come to our December meeting either with candidates that we would like to put forth for a recommendation to then be accepted by the board, or if there are no candidates, we would have to just make sure that we're still within our charter. And Lauren, was there anything else from a membership standpoint? Oh, next meeting in December, we will have to go through the annual process of electing a chair and a vice chair, which is an annual reappointment to those positions. So if you are interested in that, You can certainly let Lauren know ahead of time, but that will be happening at the December meeting. Okay, that is the housekeeping items.
And if I might add, you'll have in your packet there the press release that went out announcing the call for applications for audit committee members. That went out on September 23rd. Thus far, we have not received any applications, so I might call upon each of you to share this among your networks. The key qualifications to keep in mind that we may forget, of course, in terms of background, skill set, diverse thought, also is that you must reside within the CPS district boundaries. So we've had I've had a few people reach out to me on LinkedIn, and unfortunately the quick question is, the answer is they were not within the district. So that is a big ask for you all, and I will continue to share. I also have been in contact with our wonderful communications and marketing department, and they are going to run something on social media this week. So hopefully we can all share those things and get some interest, because I think once people hear about it and learn more, maybe I'm biased, but I think it's a pretty cool group. So thanks for your help sharing.
To post it on LinkedIn.
Just personally from my personal
Okay,
page.
so I
hopefully
can
it'll come
share.
out- Yes, hopefully it'll
Okay.
come out from the CPS LinkedIn as well.
Okay.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you for that, Lauren. I'll now pass it back over to you and I guess Isaac to give the audit update.
Good evening, everyone. I'm going to be going through the presentation with the green first slide here. Since this is one of our internal audit projects for fiscal year 25, we wanted to provide some insight into the work we've done this year so far and the changes that have been implemented. So I'm first going to start with a little bit of background and history for this process, just as a brief reminder for those and for those who may not be aware of it. So this slide here is an excerpt from the Global Internal Audit Standards. These are governed by the Institute of Internal Auditors, which we are members of, all three of us. And it kind of outlines the process for recommendations and confirming that they are implemented. So under this requirements header, you can see that ensuring or inquiring about progress towards implementation is required. Updating the status of the actions and a tracking system is required. So all of this is directly related to these standards, which we are also implementing among our department. For the next slide, a little bit of history for internal audit, tracking of past recommendations. Prior to fiscal year 24, we received yearly updates from management, and we included this in our risk assessment work and planning discussions. These were tracked in Excel by internal audit, and we reported on the statuses to the audit committee on an annual basis. So just once a year. So prior to fiscal year 24, this first bullet, the process was very time consuming and it was not very organized, and it was difficult to kind of keep track of all of the recommendations. And at the end of fiscal year 23, going into fiscal year 24, we knew there had to be a more efficient and effective way to kind of manage this and perform this work. That leads to fiscal year 24, last year. We rolled out a new process which included bi-monthly updates, which we presented to you all through the audit committee dashboard. These updates were and are tracked and updated in smart sheets by management with internal audits oversight. So we got tremendous positive feedback on this process. It was better organized, it was streamlined, some parts were automated, and it was just a much more doable lift than returning to all of these recommendations just once a year. So today for fiscal year 25, the process today is a more enhanced and refined version of the 2024 methodology. And then in addition, with the large change in leadership, we did quite a bit of work in the transfer of knowledge to the new district leadership. And so that took up a lot of time the past couple of months as well. So reasoning and sources for the process revisions that we made. So after rolling out the fiscal year 24 process last year, we realized that there was very little room for adjustments or change due to the volume of the number of sheets and the various moving aspects and the complexity. And so after 2024, we realized that there were some technical adjustments that we wanted to make. And so we started drafting possible changes there as like a back end internal audit side of things. After brainstorming the various changes from our end, the back end, we decided to look back at the fiscal year 24 as a whole. So all updates throughout the entire year, and kind of look at the collective updates from management. And this is seen in the second column here, the full year review. And we noted trends, redundancies, deficiencies throughout reviewing the year as a whole. And then as a part of the risk assessment and planning process, we had already planned to send out management surveys and feedback forms for like the risk assessment process. So we thought that kind of lended a good opportunity for us to ask for feedback from management who goes in and fills out these updates, if they had any feedback or recommended changes. So that's found in the third column here. And a lot of these changes increase usability and effectiveness on their end. And then lastly, the Association of Local Governmental Auditors released or published an article around best practices for this type of work. And so that is shown here in the fourth column. So after collecting all of the possible adjustments, we finalized the changes and have implemented them for fiscal year 25. And so somewhere throughout the collection of all of those possible changes, we decided that it would be best we include this process in our audit plan for this year, just to ensure that we do it correctly and we take the time now to kind of set us up for future success. So for revisions, after reviewing the entirety of the fiscal year 24 updates, we realized that there were some inconsistencies in some of the responses and updates. So, such as, the estimated implementation date just kept getting pushed back, which is understandable. And so for this first update, we asked management to provide these specific details for each recommendation, and these will be more of like a fixed criteria. So these will not change moving forward. And so estimated implementation date, when do they think that they're going to complete this work? Details for what success looks like. What is the end goal? What is the outcome of implementing the recommendation? And then any key metrics, support or evidence of success, and data to kind of track the effectiveness of it. So in hopes of, well, we hope that these fixed details will kind of help and encourage management to have a more robust plan for implementing the recommendations and a more accurate action plan. So the second bullet point here, in hopes to kind of add a little bit of context behind all of the in progress statuses. These will now be categorized as two different categories based on the estimated implementation date. So if the update is before that date, it will be categorized as not due. And then if it's after the date, so if we kind of passed when they thought it would be finished, those will be labeled as past due. So hopefully this will add a little bit of context behind that in progress status. For the third bullet point, in years past, internal audit has tracked the status of past recommendations and the status of remediating findings separately using two different processes. As an example, when thinking of employee reimbursements, the remediation of the audit finding might be recollecting a duplicate payment, whereas the recommendation is implement a control that wouldn't allow that. So for this, we kind of consolidated both of those processes into this new tracking of recommendations and kind of embedded it into this work. And then for the fourth bullet here, we enhanced the instructions for management. There's more transparent details for expectations and requirements. And then I also created instructional videos for tutorials for how to kind of go through and update those, make those updates in Smartsheets. And this has saved us a lot of time, I feel like, from meeting with various individuals. And it also has reduced the number of questions I have to answer. So next slide, please. Looking ahead. So for future audits, the fixed criteria that I had mentioned in slide 8 that will not change. This is going to be included in the completion and reporting phase of the audit work. So at the end of the audit, we're going to work and collaborate with management to establish the fixed criteria that we mentioned. For the second bullet point, we are hoping to develop some type of methodology to communicate the impacts of recommendations being implemented or the return on investment. And then also archiving fully complete areas. And then as you will see in just a bit, when Lauren goes through our audit plan statuses, with this project being fully complete, future updates and related work to this will be built into the audit committee preparation work. And before we switch over to the dashboard, do you all have any questions?
So when you talk about fixed criteria, specifically the implementation, expected implementation date, that will not change. So that's established at the beginning. It won't change. So as you go through iterations, that date stays the same. And the past due versus in process is based on that date. That doesn't change. Okay.
Yeah, and we're hoping to establish that fixed criteria at the end of the audit and hopefully incorporate some of those aspects into management's response.
Okay.
And we have even thought about putting together a template for management to use when putting their management response together for those.
Thank you.
And also, I think I follow here, but I just want to be clear. Is we've already done the audit. This is our recommendations, and this is management's response to the recommendations. So basically, these revisions, the fixed criteria, the status, the consolidated process for the remediation are filled out by management, not by internal audit.
Yes, correct. And those specific bullet points were the work that we performed, kind of setting it up. And then going forward, management is the one that provides those updates.
Perfect. Thank you.
Mike knows all about it. He provides lots.
So my experience being an auditor, I would say I agree with your estimated implementation date should never change. Although I think you should have a field, because there are reasonable times where that will, what you believe you can implement in 6 months to a year actually isn't achievable when you get into the process. So you probably should have a field that is specific to updated or something to that effect that only audit can change, so that management establishes it, it's there, it's at, and they would have to come to you. And if it's not, then it's reported up as being past due, and nobody likes to be on that naughty list. The other thing is, when you're defining what your success looks like, do you guys have a role in that? I mean, I understand that you would provide a recommendation, but if management is defining what success looks like, I would expect audit has a role in agreeing to that. Is that a correct assumption?
Yes, certainly. And in past, I think we informally kind of collaborated with management and kind of walked them through what it is we're expecting. And I think our recommendations have varied over the years in the level of detail we provide. Some are kind of vague, some are very specific to what needs to be done. So moving forward, it'll be very clear that we will collaborate with management to ensure that what they say they're going to do, we agree with, and we agree it will address the control issue that was found.
And your template idea is very successful when I see it operationally. So I highly recommend doing that. That's my experience.
Yeah, and one thing I might just tag along onto this is Emma is working with Cody Hutchins from the Treasurer's Office, who leads a lot of the KPI and ROI work. And so Isaac is jumping in on those meetings here, starting up to say, what do we do for all the projects that are already in place? Maybe that we're going to need to have a little bit of discussion about what success looks like, and adopting some of the methodologies. And since they're kind of the experts in ROI, how do we convert that and work with management to get those in place? But yeah, great feedback.
And we also ask for a text entry from management. So I believe we mention if they are experiencing any resource issues or any changes in their department, that they can kind of jot that down, so we have some insight as to why things may not be progressing as they should be.
I'll just add, I think in theory, the way I look at it, and certainly correct me if I'm wrong, the goals should be the success measurement from administration should be tied to the board's goals and established goals and guardrails that we talk about exhaustively. And it should also align with the measurements financially from the treasurer. So there should never be a surprise. It should be, hey, these are the goals that the board has set, and that in alignment with administration, so everyone knows what those are. And then the internal auditor and her department are looking at how efficiently are you getting to those goals that everybody already knows about. And the treasurer is looking at, are we fiscally responsible to them as well? So in my mind, the measurement is almost driven by what we've established as goals already. So the success of them shouldn't be necessarily determined solely by administration. It should be collectively, we all recognize that we're going towards these goals. Hey, did you get there? Why didn't you get there? And are we being responsible when we get there? In theory. Now I know that's different, but and then you've got the other entities that are like the state auditor. Oh, no, you didn't get there. And this is what we're looking at. But I think it should be more transparent than just administration setting them in their measurement of success only. So again, correct me if I'm wrong, but that's kind of how I looked at it from an overarching. Auditing is not necessarily sexy to me, but it can be, it has moments where I kind of liken it to things that make sense. So let me know if this doesn't.
Yeah, so a perfect example of that, I might lean over to Mike a little or Jen on the call. An example of which we've seen already is, so now we've issued audit recommendations. Where do they go? And I think Mike and Jen and the treasurer's office team have just as an example, have embedded some of those as their goals. So Mike, I don't know if you could speak to like a QI project, perhaps even employee reimbursement, which Isaac mentioned before, kind of how all these pieces then fall in line and we all work together in this big cycle.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think one thing is the easiest way to get these things moving is to make them part of an existing process. So some of the improvement things we've tagged into the employee's goals. So their evaluation goal is to solve some of these things. So that gets a high level of buy-in. To what Lauren said, like employee reimbursements is actually my new QI project that I'm working on. And, as we kind of set that up, we took a look at some of the stuff that's in the dashboard you're going to see here, and very specific things that, okay, let's build this in from day one into this project so that we know that we're not having two groups meeting. We're not doing double work. It's built into work we're already doing.
And I guess my question was to piggyback on that. Is there a line item on a yearly evaluation that says there is a goal? Because I think that's when people are held accountable. We can talk about all these things, but if it doesn't end up on someone's yearly evaluation, they're never held accountable for it. And it just keeps getting kicked down the line. And we keep talking about it and nothing really gets resolved. So how do we move that needle? I don't know if that's for you, Michael.
I mean, I'll say this: every CAS administrator has 3 goals, and those goals is what Dr. Moffat said should be aligned to the board strategic plan, and it kind of cascades down. But definitely inside that, a lot of times, we can build in, some of these things for the specific supervisor of the area. This can be a good goal for them to work on and solve in a year. And then, like you said, there's accountability.
May I add, and I definitely agree with Dr. Moffat that our work should align to the board's goals. I don't want to have any surprises for this committee because some of the work is important, but not really directly connected to a goal or a guardrail. Important work, for example, transportation is not specifically called out in a goal or guardrail, but we have to be able to get the kids to and from school. So important. And so there may be some audit areas around transportation or student dining or I could go on and on. But I will say that one way, Ms. Lawrence, that I think this year doing a better job of avoiding kicking a can and really addressing pieces. Lauren, when her schedule allows, is coming to the senior leadership team meetings. She is having opportunities for agenda time. She is sharing with me directly, here's where we still have gaps. And so I think that we should have a plan of collaboration that will help close and end some of the kicking the can.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more because we've kind of separated our recommendations to treasurer's office and then kind of that all reports up through Jen and then now under interim superintendent Murphy. And, it's been phenomenal already. And that Superintendent Murphy is asking us for reports. Give me all of the recommendations that fall under my purview and who's leading them and where they stand. So I just sent that to her today, and she's going to use those, she was saying, in her one-on-ones with all of her direct reports. So I think we're really getting to the version 2.0, not just due to the great work that Isaac has led, but due to the whole team really buying in and investing and holding everyone who is part of this reporting structure accountable. So tremendously grateful for the work that's taken place on our team through Isaac's leadership, but also everyone for being so receptive and participating.
Okay, if I could just wrap it up, I think we're all excited to see the number of past recommendations go down. So hopefully all of this work gets us to that point. So.
All right, so we're going to hop over to the audit committee dashboard now. We're actually going to start at the bottom with the past recommendation stuff, since I just kind of went through it all, and then I'll turn it over to Lauren to go through the remaining areas on the dashboard. Yeah. To the first, up a little bit to the graph with the horizontal bars. There you go. Right here. Thank you. So this first graph with the horizontal red bars shows all of the incomplete recommendations by fiscal year. So this kind of outlines where some of the incomplete recommendations stand and when they were issued or when the report was issued. And this does include all of the fiscal year 24 recommendations from last year. So next we have the individual areas that are being tracked with the semicircle graphs just below. There are currently 10 areas. They're in alphabetical order that have recommendations from different audit reports as well. So if there's more than one fiscal year listed, that is just an additional report that was issued from the work that we did. So as you can see, these are, for now, presented as just two colors, complete and not due. That's because no one put their estimated implementation date before today, which is good. So in the future, there will be possibly 3 different colors on there, with the last one being past due as that date passes. And then the final graph at the bottom, this outlines the history of internal audit recommendations since, I believe, Lauren's start back in 2017. And these are in ascending order. The rows in green reflect areas that have been fully implemented, and all of the recommendations for that area or that report have been implemented. And so that is all for the past recommendation stuff. And this is kind of the lay of the land moving forward. Any other questions or concerns?
So for the past recommendations that are open now, do they already have dates and plans and all of those metrics established, or is that something that you're still building out on all of those?
Yeah, so all of the fixed criteria, the fixed details were included in the first update that we received.
Okay.
And I probably should have mentioned, I would say 95% of the recommendations included an implementation date within this fiscal year. So it's promising, but
Ambitious.
yeah,
Ambitious,
yeah.
that's a good-
Yes. But some of them are bigger lifts and they may take a little longer. But yes, that is all established.
I like that because then it allows us to step back and say, administration, this is a this should be a priority, or board, this should be a priority from our vantage point. And I don't know that we necessarily always had that in the past.
So there were some there that had listed prior years, like 2018, 2020, 2023. So some of them had prior years. None of them were red. So that means that the action plans from those years are complete. Is that what it means? That they would fall into the green? Or they had action plans that extended multiple years?
Are you referring to the half circles?
Yes.
So we had never established a set date in the past. We just allowed them to, or we presented it as
Okay.
just in progress. And so moving forward,
Okay.
when that passes, that's how it will be displayed.
Okay.
And if you're looking for like a little bit more of a breakdown, and maybe I misunderstood your question, you can see, for example, I think P card or payroll, one with a few of projects listed. P card's always a good example. You can see on the table a little bit more detail about the complete, not
Okay.
due and past due if you
On that
want to
table.
break up. Yep.
Okay.
Versus I think the half circle is a summary of all
Yeah.
of that together.
Okay.
We don't have that.
Thank you.
Should we have a?
No,
Okay.
it's just available online.
Got it.
It's a mess to print and it's tiny, but we can if you'd like to moving forward.
It's less tiny than that.
Are you able to move, zoom in a bit by chance?
Well, I don't
But-
think we're gonna take time to.
Yeah.
to
So
go
that
into
was
the-
sent out in the email. So if you're able to hop back in, play around, it's kind of a dynamic dashboard. So printed, it just loses a little bit of its effectiveness, but we would be happy to print if anyone would like. Just let us know.
Yeah, for future meetings, that would be helpful, just so we have it.
I did have a quick question, and maybe this is common knowledge that I don't have, but are the past recommendations periodically reviewed for still having applicability in the current periods? Yeah.
Yeah, so that is one of the questions that we ask management to provide. We actually list it as, is this recommendation still applicable? Sometimes board policy changes in department structure kind of makes a recommendation somewhat irrelevant or outdated. And so if that does occur, then we will, they obviously don't have to kind of continue implementing that. But we do ask for kind of applicability. I think there were a few around student fees where the board ended up passing some policy that made that recommendation not applicable anymore.
Okay, any other discussion or questions?
And I can briefly walk you through the top half of the dashboard if that would be helpful. I can keep it short and sweet. And if you have any questions, happy to dive in further.
Sure.
Luckily, we are pretty open on time. We had one of our presentations canceled today. Unfortunately, we'll get it rescheduled, but we're pretty flexible with our time today. Starting at the top, just a reminder, when this is sent out via email, that we are summarizing items for review at the very top. So this time there were a couple of videos linked. I had the pleasure of presenting to the full board on September 23rd, which I think really ties into the audit committee's third goal as well of sharing what the audit committee and internal audit are all about. And then further, the budget, finance, and growth committee was linked. So moving right along, I'm going to jump ahead over to external audits. There have been 2 external audits that have been completed and reported to us since our last meeting. I apologize. I realized just before we walked down here, I hadn't uploaded those documents. So they are available in the Google folder now. Great news is that they are both compliant due to the hard work of both of those teams that lead the audits. One to highlight specifically is Jessica Shelley, our Director of Student Dining Services, has expressed to me for a long period of time all of the steps that her audit has required and the back and forth. And due to her persistence and attention to detail, she was able to explain and teach even the auditors all that CPS does and how we are accountable to all of the compliance measures. So I think sometimes, dare I say, our teams also help educate the auditors who maybe aren't quite as familiar with all of the ins and outs. So really great celebrations there that they both were compliant. Moving on to the status of the project plans within this year's internal audit plan, I should say. We're moving right along. Things are progressing according to plan. One thing that's notable that isn't necessarily shared here is that we are developing an internal audit dashboard that's nearly complete. And what we will be doing is tracking every single task, which you kind of see broken out in the future projects. Every task will be assigned to a preparer, a reviewer, which is traditional. We've done that. But we're also locking ourselves into dates. So instead of our dates passing and saying, oh, well, because this happened, now we have to adjust, such as life, we are locking those in, and we are going to really hold ourselves accountable through an internal audit dashboard. And also will help us with resource allocation. If one of us has a bunch of due dates in 1 week, we can reallocate and help one another. So I'm really excited. That could be something we can share with you all if you want to glance at it, but it's on the precipice of completion. But the reason I mention it is that will correlate with our overall progress, and we will also hold ourselves accountable on a weekly basis, of course, as we meet as a team once per week, if not many more. So I won't go into too much detail, but you can see again as a reminder, the projects are broken down by project type, either assurance, advisory, follow-up, and so on and so forth. I will again mention the timeline. We're really trying to focus on timeline this year. You'll see the timeline of when we intend to begin and complete a project listed next to the project title. So we're really trying to keep ourselves on schedule. Of course, as we just discussed, things can happen, but that's our goal. So we're moving right along, and you will see if you get the chance to hop in here later and play around. Like Isaac said, the status of past recommendation project is 100% complete. So that's one project now we've kind of checked off of our to-do list for the year, right according to schedule. So I'm happy to explain anything if you have questions about specific projects, but in the interest of time, I can pause here. Great. Well, thank you all. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Lauren and Isaac. Let's go ahead and invite the treasurer's office to do their presentation on an overview of grants.
Sure. Thank you. Thanks, Rob. All right. So kind of talking through this, we want to talk about, kind of grants, how grants kind of apply to the audit and the audit committee. And our state and federal grants participate in the normal financial audits. Plus we have a thing called monitoring. Monitoring sort of like a traditional audit, but also has some things that are kind of different. And so we'll talk through those as we go through it. With me today, I have Nan Haygood. Nan is our manager of state and federal programs. She's been in that role for a little over a year now. But she's been with the treasurer's office for probably 7 or 8 years, almost 10 now. So she's jumped into a difficult environment that has a lot of rules and a lot of regulations, and been working through that. So we're going to kind of tag team this presentation as we go. Next slide, Rob. All right. So high level, we're going to talk about, again, like I said, about what is monitoring. What does that mean? The state actually did an on-site monitoring this spring, which is a big deal. And we'll talk about why that's a big deal. And then just talk a little bit about future things as well. Turn your mic on. There you go.
So the monitoring by ODEW isn't exactly like what you think of as a traditional accounting audit. And that's why it is called monitoring. And so not having been through one before, we faced this with a lot of trepidation of, they were gonna come down here and try to find what they could find, but it really did turn out to be a really collaborative effort. And so their stated purposes of monitoring include opportunities for support, which we did find, identifying areas for growth and really coaching on ways we can do things better with our grants. Clarifying requirements of programs and the different rules. You know, the rules are always changing, so making sure we're aware of any kind of legislative updates. And then just making sure that we're doing things consistently across our grants, across our departments, across our funding sources. And so the way the monitoring works with ODEW is they identify different levels of risk, and that determines what kind of audit you get. So you can either have an on-site visit like we had, you can have a desk survey, which basically entails all the same information, but they don't come down and review it. And then lastly, if you do a self-survey, you're basically just going in and saying, I did everything right. And you don't have the level of detail unless, you know, you're basically just checking the box, you can trust me. And then they can ask for more if they want to, you know, ask a specific question. And so there's a few other kinds of follow-up. Desk reviews only occur if you have a problem during your on-site or another audit. And then if you have a problem and don't correct the problem in 2 years, it can escalate into a progressive enforcement, but hopefully we don't ever need to know anything about this. We're doing what they say. And so they have a very kind of just quantitative way to assign these audits to different districts. You saw on the previous page, only 32 districts last year had on-sites, and most of those are the bigger districts or districts in trouble. And so there's 17 specific factors. Each factor just gets points for where you fall within it. And basically, you know, all of the big urbans like us, Columbus, Cleveland, we're always tier 3 because we're high risk, you know, just by the amount of award alone. We get so much money that, of course, they're interested in what we're doing with it. And so that's our primary reason, but I also just highlighted for your information some of the other things that factored in. So for example, last year I was new in September in this role, so that would have increased our risk score compared to having had, you know, Rebecca Vogler for years and years in the past. So it's a whole combination of factors, each with different weights. Obviously, amount of award has a huge weight, and that's what tips us over. We actually have not had an on-site though since 2017 because of COVID. So we were due around 2020. It was shifted to a desk review. So that also led to a lot of stress preparing for this because a lot of people had never really been through it before. It had been so long. There's also a lot of new reps at ODEW that had never really been through it before because they were on hold for so long. So even though they occur more often this week.
Next slide, Rob.
And so this was a massive undertaking. They came down for 3 days last March, the beginning of March. And you know, there were hundreds of hours of preparation before that. So you basically get surveys relating to each grant. There were 6 separate surveys, one for Consolidated, one for ESSER, all related in Kenny-Vento to a specific set of items. And then each survey encompasses a lot of areas. So for example, just the one survey on the consolidated application of federal funds covered, you know, basically 13 different grants and then all of the related activities. So it's kind of, you know, there's a survey with different areas, questions under the areas. While they were here, they made 22 school visits to our different high schools, elementary schools. They visited all of our satellite locations, you know, Talbot House, Children's Hospital. They went to 8 of the selected non-public schools to talk to those principals. They met with all the different managers of all the budgets, with Rebecca Beach from Project Connect, with Emily from Curriculum, to just really talk to them one-on-one and just, you know, ask them what they're doing and see if they feel a sense of understanding and purpose for the people managing this meeting. They brought 13 people down, so it was a massive undertaking getting them around. Some people stayed in the building and just looked at documents, and some were out in the schools visiting and talking and observing the schools.
Hey, Rob, can you click on the schedule just to give some idea of how chaotic this thing was? Yeah, this was a 3-day schedule by hour, by person. Yeah.
And a lot of people in the district helped. We had everybody,
Yes.
Kevin was driving them to schools. We had, they weren't allowed to drive their state cars.
Yep.
So we had people getting them all across the city, 4 or 5 schools in a day, but the district really came together on it.
Yeah, definitely want to shout out the principals and administrators who took time out of their day to show off what they were doing. It was quite an event. So, result of that, they were very complimentary of what I said. I mean, I wrote down some of the quotes, and I think we shared these before at finance committee, but just like the biggest thing they said is, we can see how much you care about your kids and their education. Like, it's evident to them walking around. They visit school districts everywhere in Ohio, so they could see that for sure. Out of the 6 surveys, 5 of them were completely compliant. We had 1 non-compliant, which non-compliance is kind of rough because you can miss it in one area out of 150 questions. That makes the whole survey non-compliant. We had 1 issue. So issues are kind of the higher level. When they go through and look at everything, issues are kind of the higher level problem they identify. So we had 1 of those, and that requires an improvement plan. And then they had 7 items that are called technical assistance. So these are much more like recommendations, right? Like, hey, here's a better idea. Maybe you can do this way or that. So overall, though, that was for everything they looked at. And if you go to the next slide, Rob, that's the grant life cycle. For everything you looked at, it was a tiny amount of things that they came back with. The other thing, remember we said, can you go up the slide, Rob? Sorry. No, I guess that slide got knocked out. All right, never mind. Go ahead. So yeah, that one. All right. So this is just an idea of the programs that were reviewed. So you can see they hit all the big ones, Title I, ESSER, of course, those. And in addition to individual grants, they look at individual items. So like you'll see on there's a bullet point for properly licensed staff. So they look across all the grants to make sure that any of the staff working in those grants are properly licensed through ODE. So there's a lot of pieces there. The other thing, Rob, if you can hit that life cycle slide. So we said there are some differences between monitoring and traditional audits. So your traditional financial audit is always looking backwards, right? You close the year and they come look at the year that ended. With monitoring, this is actually in the middle of the year, right? So they're in the middle of the year. So all of those technical assistance items, any of the issues they find, you can start working on those right away, and you can correct inside the year you're working in, which is kind of nice. All right, Nan's going to show you a little bit about what this monitoring looks like.
So this is where we actually do the work of preparing. So before they come down, we gather all of this information and upload it to the ODE and their application. And you can see this is just within 1 survey. So this was a consolidated survey. Within that survey, you can see all the different areas that they're investigating. And then every one of those little green boxes could have, multiple questions. So each line, this is the 1 line, has, 20 something boxes with questions that apply to that particular area. So it really is a huge effort because we're basically reaching out to almost everybody that touches those funds in any way to get documentation uploaded, financial reports, compliance checkboxes, narrative answers, just every possible kind of combination of proof that we're doing what we said we were going to do and that we're doing it properly and within compliance. The next one, this is just a sample question. So this, again, is just one question in one of those boxes. And so you can see this one is a narrative. So this would have been something we worked with the principals on to provide this information to us. And this, is requesting for all schools involved, every single school, to write out 2 to 3 statements of how they spend their money, what are their goals, how does it fit in the intent and purpose. And so it's really just a giant puzzle piece of trying to gather the information and get it in the right place. And it was quite interesting.
So we would say not only is this a math test for us, but this is also an essay test, right? And so that's why the collaboration between the financial team and the superintendent side is so critical.
All right, next slide.
Yeah, next slide is just the kind of cover letter of the report. The green highlighted sentence, I won't read it, but as they said, well, I'll read a little bit of it. And they said, engagement activities shared with your parents and family, staff, district coordinators, English language learners, team, and homeless education staff was found to be exemplary. Your staff was gracious and demonstrated dedication and concerns toward meeting program requirements with integrity. I mean, I think that's a strong statement of what we do here. Next slide, Rob.
Sadly, all that work, that was the sole result. So it's not like a financial audit where you get a whole book. That literally was the result of all of that. And so, the fact that they only had 2 sentences to say what they wanted to say, and they were very complimentary and really, I think, honed in on the things that we do really well. I think that just really shows that it's evident and people can see it in a very short visit. So this is where it looks like where we actually see our results. And again, you can see the one that is non-compliant is the ESEA because it has the red box. So again, out of all those hundreds of green boxes, we missed one. And so the whole survey is non-compliant. And we do, put a correction plan in to reverse that for next year.
Yeah. So if you hit the next slide, Rob. Yeah, so the one issue area was around Title I delinquent and neglected, which is a pocket of the Title I funds that's specially set aside for their student populations. What makes this one really interesting is the money can only be spent at neglected and delinquent sites. So there's a small number of sites that can, and a lot of those are partner agencies for CPS. So it is one of the more difficult areas to spend, but we jumped in, right away with help from interim superintendent's team and put in a correction active plan. We added some staff from our budget there. We added a financial literacy life skill teacher at juvenile, and we've just been, in regular scheduled meetings with the team around that area just to make sure, the staff is there, we're spending the money, people are getting, their orders in, their requisitions in to make sure we're spending it. And you can see there, we spent 147,000 already by the end of in the first 3 months of the fiscal year. So we are definitely pushing that improvement piece.
Do you think that money would have been forfeited without having the monitoring in place? Or that them coming in for the review?
The review kind of showed us things we already knew. So I wouldn't say that we weren't already trying. It definitely gives a little more like oomph to it to be part of the review. But that was an area we were already looking at. Right? So we were already thinking like, okay, how do we improve this? And then the last slide we have for you is just the other technical assistance items, which are really high level. A lot of them, honestly, are paperwork things where it's like, oh, you need this document, or oh, this document just needs an update. Like it's not like it's bad. It's just like, oh, this contract hasn't been updated in 3 years. When are you going to update it? And so some of that stuff is just easy stuff to knock out.
The difference with these is they'll still be looking at them, but with the non-compliant item, they're following up, again, like 90 days out to see, are you on track? What are you doing? So it's much more intensive. These items will definitely all be looked at twice, in this year's monitoring visit, which this year will be a desk survey. But they'll obviously want to know what progress we've made. But like one thing Mark that Mike pointed out earlier was, for example, they found one thing that they deemed unallowable that had been charged to a non-public school. And because it was still only in March and the books aren't closed till June, we were able to just go ahead and journal entry that and get it to the right place before the books closed, rather than, paying the money back if they found it, 2 years later or something like that, or during the financial audit. So that really just kind of highlighted, how much flexibility it brings to immediately implementing their suggestions and their ideas, and just, really getting a lot of guidance from people with just great years of experience and knowledge.
Yeah, it is like your opportunity to ask some of the most senior people from the state questions, you know, that you don't see these people all the time. But hey, while you're here, we had a lot of really cool kind of lunch conversations. Just like as we're having lunch, like, hey, what do you think about this? Or here's an idea, you know, kind of react to that. So that was nice too.
And then, so like I said, they'll be following up this year and focusing on some of these items. We normally would be due for our next onsite in 3 years, but they're actually looking at changing that around and actually making it more of a retroactive. So they're, I guess, because if you're a site that gets monitored in January and you're getting monitored on the current year, that's kind of challenging because you're still just getting your carryover and everything. So for the sites that they come earlier in the year, it's a bit of a challenge to really have all the documentation. So they're looking at it internally themselves of kind of doing it more in the mid-year of your 3-year cohort cycle. And so because of those changes, we might not end up with an onsite again until fiscal year 29, because they're trying to just, you know, reformulate their whole schedule and not do 2 people in a row. So we're not really too sure about that. That's what they're saying right now.
I think we'll stop and take questions there.
I have a question. You mentioned that one question in the entire survey can make the entire survey non-compliant. So when they come back for follow-up, will they focus on the entire survey and the areas, or just a specific area where there was a non-compliant issue?
We meet with our main consultant monthly, you know, and talk about areas, and she's actually in this particular area, she's been meeting with us and the assistant principal of that department monthly. And so we're getting all the information we can to make sure we're compliant, but that they'll specifically follow up on this year, kind of as it relates to last year. Whereas the other ones, they'll just follow up on that when they do the normal desk survey for next year. You know, they'll take a little bit harder look at our documentation
Okay.
to make sure the missing items are there this year. Some contracts are outdated, make sure we've got a current version of the contract.
Oh.
So definitely the spotlight will be on this issue. And then the rest of the desk survey will kind of just go as normal.
Thanks.
I believe you mentioned that of the 22 schools monitored, they were all elementary.
No,
Hmm.
it was a combination. So
Okay.
they did try to pick quite a variety of schools, both sides of town, some of our more unique schools as well, you know, Montessori school as well as career tech. And so they did get a really good cross section, and they did pick those themselves.
Okay.
So we didn't even get that list of which schools till I think less than 2 weeks before they arrived. So it was a lot of scurrying once we contacted those happy principals.
I think I say this every other meeting, but just call the attention to the fact that the district is highly monitored, audited. And to me, this sounds like a successful venture here, and it sounds like it was a big lift. And so thank you for the work that you did. We're constantly in the eye of the community and the business world. And so to hear, you know, positive results from an organization coming in and looking at everything, that's a good thing for us.
Thank you.
Are you able to share that green language that we received? I mean, put that on something on the website. I mean, I've written a lot of audit reports in my day. I've never said those words in an audit report. Ever. So I mean, and the fact that it's being put out there, to me, as somebody who does it, who had done it for a living for a very long time, that's something you should put out so that the community sees.
Thank you.
We can provide the exact, you know, like I said, it's kind of anticlimactic when I was this was a little bit, it was very positive. That's how I want to see it, that was to see the appropriateness.
Okay, if there's no other comments or questions, thank you to the treasurer's office for that. We're a little behind, but we could probably make it up. Jen, are you online, or Kevin?
I am. I'm here.
Okay, we can turn it over to you to have you regale us with whatever you would like to share.
Yeah, Rob, I can't turn my camera on. Can you do it? But while he's doing that, so I have just a couple topics to update you with. Good afternoon, everyone, by the way. Sorry, I was late. I was having technical difficulties trying to get online because I guess when the meeting got rescheduled, I didn't get the new link. But having said that, the good news is we finally do have a fiscal year 25 budget approved by the board, and it is now filed with the Hamilton County Budget Commission and loaded into our software, and we are running the year. We are now analyzing, budget to actuals and monitoring people's spends. One big concern that I shared with Lauren and Dan and Liz, I think you were on that call. There's a new Senate Bill 308 that's floating around out there that could have a devastating effect to our revenue stream. The recommendation is to move the fixed sum millage into the 20 more floor calculation. So every school district has to have 20 mills to operate. Anything above and beyond that is, I guess, gravy, but only the fixed rate levies are part of that calculation. We have over 20 mills in a fixed sum levies that if they were put into the 20 mill floor calculation. So House Bill 920 has a reduction factor. So as inflation goes up, the millage goes, as assessed values go up, the millage rate goes down so that we collect about the same amount of revenue on a levy. So as those millage rates drop and drop and drop and drop, and collectively, if they hit below 20 mills, then they automatically increase the rates to get you back up to 20 mills. The fixed sum levies are not part of that calculation currently, but there's a recommendation to put that into the into the calculation. And we're estimating almost a $10 million loss annually if that were to happen. So we're preparing a letter writing campaign and board resolution. The lobbyists are going to come present at a public board meeting on October 28th. So you might be interested in watching that board meeting. And then once we can get a form letter put together, we can ship it out to you and you can help us write some letters for support. The third topic is we've been contacted by the city of Cincinnati. We are, our 5-year agreement on the Community Reinvestment Act agreement is going to expire next year. But prior to that, there's some state legislation changed that allowed TIF districts that were going to expire to renew for another 15 years, I believe. And the cities approached us about doing that. And the carrot they're dangling to get us to agree to do that is that they would pay us the most recent reimbursement rate on a payment in lieu of taxes rate at 33%, instead of at the 25% of the grouping of expiring TIF districts. So there's 3 different groups of TIF districts. One's at 25, one's at 27, and some at 33. So they're saying, if you agree to let us extend these agreements, we'll pay the 25 ones up to the 33%. And so we're talking to the board about the impact of those things. But we may, we'll be presenting the impact of this agreement. Mike's done a lot of analysis, a lot of calculation. And so on the 26th of October, we're having a budget workshop, a board workshop. We'll be sharing that data with the board. And then we can figure out a plan to move forward. Fourth topic, CPS Foundation. So we've been approached. We started out with ABC, which is Activities Beyond the Classroom, as they actually 20 some years ago, I think, started out as a foundation, and they kind of sort of merged into a vendor as well. And so they're kind of fundraising, but they're also providing services to us. And so we're talking about, and superintendent's in the room kind of leading this initiative, so you might want to comment on this, Ms. Murphy, but talking about establishing a foundation. ABC's interested. We're just trying to figure out what the legal rules around it, whether they continue to provide vendor services or not. And so we'll be updating the board on that as well. Shauna, do you want to add anything to that?
I think Jen mentioned we are giving an update to the board during their retreat October the 26th. In particular, we were asked to go a little bit deeper looking at the feasibility of ABC. Are there any other options? Is there an internal option to do this? So we're working.
Yeah, so as budgets get tighter and tighter, schools, individual schools want to do more and more fundraising to buy services for their kids. And so we just want to formalize that and make sure that everybody has equitable access to fundraising, so that that we do that in the right way. So we'll keep you updated on that. The next topic is that the fiscal year 24 annual financial audit is underway. Plattenberg, who's outsourced from the state, is keeping Kevin Ashley very, very, very busy. And so we've been providing a lot of information. I think we have a meeting next week on and see how things are going, making sure we're staying on top of everything we're supposed to be providing. And if I can remove any barriers of getting information. So that's, so far, it seems to be going very smoothly. We were able to file all of our final expenditure grants that Nan manages. They're a small, mighty team of greatness. And so we were able to file by September 30th, all of our final expenditure reports. And I'm happy to say that we were at 72% spend of the total. We have carryover rules that were allowed, but we were at 72% spend on September 30th through 24. Compared to last year, we were only at 57%. And that the reason being was there was so much turnover in executive leadership that people just didn't know they had the money to spend. And there was also a huge turnover in the grants team, so it was hard to stay on top of that. But Nan and her team have done an incredible job meeting with schools, meeting with budget managers, and making sure that the spend is in the year that we're getting the allocation. So kudos to Nan and her team. And then the last thing is that because we finished one budget, we're kicking off the next cycle after about 10 minutes of breathing time. And so on the budget workshop on the 26th is when we're going to start talking about the board priorities, the phase 2 of the growth plan, and what do we want to set money aside, what are our estimated revenues, and the game plan. But we do have to, we typically kick off on October 15th with calculating student projections, and that usually drives the beginning part of the budget. And so we're getting busy with the budget, and we'll keep you updated on that as well as we make progress. So any questions? I try to talk fast to buy you some more time.
I appreciate that. I don't have any questions. I just would say that if anybody on the audit committee has an interest in any of the topics that Jen just described, and wants to pitch in and help, please reach out. Again, I don't want to put anyone on the spot and say, you got to do this and you got to do this, but I think we have a unique position this year to be a resource for some of these topics.
Yes, thank you.
I'm just going to add, Jen, can you share with regard to Senate Bill 308? I thought I heard you mention that that is really only applicable to a small number of districts in the state. Of course, CPS is one of them. So it feels very personal, but just a little bit more on that one and why we could use your help with that.
Yeah, so most districts don't use fixed sum levies they use continuing levies. And so their continuing levies are already part of their 20 mil floor calculation. But for whatever reason, the southwest part of Ohio doesn't want to do continuing levies. They wanted to do fixed sum levies, and they were always at 5-year cycles. So that was a way for the public to hold us accountable to what we're spending that money on. So we have 3 fixed sum levies, and 2 of them are on 10-year cycles. One's coming up for next November for a renewal. That's a 5-year cycle. That's the $48 million one that has the $15 million preschool set aside. So I think because there's only a few districts that use fixed sum levies, it doesn't seem like this is going to be a huge deal, but it's going to be a huge deal for those of us that use fixed sum levies, and especially since we have 20 mills. I think it's like 25 mills, those 3 levies would combine to. And so a mill in our district represents about $7 million of the revenue. So $9 to $10 million annually would hurt us. To answer your question, Dr. Moffett?
Yes, it does. Thank you. I just wanted a little bit more context so that you all understood why that's significant to us. And it may not be significant when you talk to other people around the state because they're like, oh, that doesn't matter to us, but it really matters to us.
Can I just ask big picture on that Senate bill? Is it benefiting other districts or what is like, who wants it and why? What's the point of it?
So I can't remember the person who recommended it, but the impact is going to be a positive to the homeowner. Because when we go below and we are in our commercial properties under the 20 mil floor. So it automatically raises taxes to get us back up to the 20 mil floor. Well, it hits the homeowner. It's basically an unvoted tax. So with the pressure of the triennial update and everybody property taxes going up, they're looking for ways to save homeowner money. And so that would be the benefit.
It's sponsored by Sandra O'Brien, Lang, and Schaefer.
Thank you. I can't remember.
I think it also highlights the complexity of districts funding, all of those things that you just described. So thank you, Jen, for your time.
Sure.
We have other business on the agenda, but I'm not aware of any other business unless anyone has any. And if we don't, then that gets us back on track.
Just as we did that.
Yes. So if there's nothing else, we have I butcher this every time we have to do this, but we would like to go into executive session to discuss a security matter. And so I would ask someone to motion to move into executive session.
So moved.
Thank you. In a second. Thank you. I think we do have to do a roll call vote for this. Okay.
So roll call vote, Dan Holdhouse,
Yes.
Liz Guttridge,
Yes.
David Foote,
Yes.
Seth Harmon,
Yes.
Kevin Hoffman,
Yes.
Paul Kitzmiller,
Yes.
Carol Mitchell Lawrence.
Yes.
Clarice Warner,
Yes.
Brandon Craig, Ben Lindy,
Yes.
Dr. Cream Moffett.
Yes.
Thank you.